Well, the Liberals have plucked another MP from opposition ranks, and it is perhaps the most surprising defection yet.
Marilyn has tremendous experience in business as an engineer, international business experience, and 10 years, 4 elections of experience in Parliament, and one of the most collaborative members of Parliament working across party lines.
I've been watching the Prime Minister since he was elected, and the big things that he is driving, nation-building projects, diversifying our trade, bolstering our defense, plans to address criminality and build more homes. These are all the things that Canadians want.
Ontario MP Marilyn Gladu has left her long-time Conservative caucus to join the Liberals. She represented her Sarnia-Erie riding as a Conservative since 2015. That makes 4 Conservatives and 1 New Democrat who have crossed the floor to the Liberals since November. Prime Minister Mark Carney is now just 1 seat away from a majority government. He's all but certain to clinch it on Monday when 3 by-elections are held. Liberal Cabinet Minister Evan Solomon is claiming an assist for this latest floor crossing, saying he's been in talks with Gladu for some time.
I had lots of conversations with Marilyn, and I've known her for a long time, and she is someone that wants to build, and so I was very happy that she decided that she wants to come over and work with the Prime Minister to build the country.
Are you still talking to other MPs about from other parties about joining the party?
We are talking to lots of people.
Do you think someone else could cross the floor before Monday?
We're talking to lots of people.
Lots of people, lots of political implications. Time to talk about it with the Power Panel. Amanda Alvaro is a former Liberal Party communications strategist in our Ottawa studio. Tim Powers has worked as a strategist for Conservative parties. Jordan Leichnitz is a former NDP strategist, and Sherelle Evelyn is the managing editor of the Hill Times. It's always a great day for the Power Panel. It is a particularly interesting day today. Amanda, I actually want to start with you. Another Power panelist, Supriya Dwivedi, has been quite vocal on social media today, on Twitter, with her concern about this move, because she's looking at some of Ms. Gladu's more socially conservative views, be they around abortion, comments, about not supporting the ban on conversion therapy, and questioning what the Liberal Party under Mark Carney stands for. How do you feel about this addition to the Liberal fold?
Yeah, I mean, there were certainly some raised eyebrows today, and there was a lot of chatter amongst, Liberal circles and even all over social media. And I think there's a couple of things that I considered as a takeaway. I mean, obviously, the Liberals are not just defending their tent right now, they're expanding it. And I think that there's an argument to be made that modern governments survive volatility by expansion, by, kind of stretching those traditional party lines. But the problem with expanding the tent is that you also have to manage who's in it and the values that come into it. And so some of, Marilyn Gladu's more questionable views on things like abortion, conversion therapy, even vaccines, the fact that even she voted against cannabis 10 years ago, I think that those are things that the party will find to be challenging as we move forward. I think they're betting that voters are less ideological right now, that they're focused more on stability and outcomes and that cohesion and unity that will come with a majority government, especially when faced with the constant instigation and distraction of Trump. But you still have to be who you are. You're still going to, at some point, have to present yourself, as a party to voters, and those values will matter, and the people inside it will matter. So I think the question that I'm left with, is Marilyn Gladu prepared to stand behind the non-negotiable party rule to vote for things like pro-choice and women's reproductive rights?
Yeah, and we did have James Maloney, Liberal Caucus Chair, on earlier, Sherelle, and he was like, listen, there's no question, if you're a member of our party, this is what we stand for. So I guess the question becomes, like, you can sort of understand in the abstract, this is a real stretch for the Liberals, but where could the rubber hit the road here? Like, how tricky is this really for them?
Yeah, I do think it comes down to what when you say here's what the party stands for. They say it's a big tent. But it's what is the price of admission into that tent? Is it simply a desire to win, a desire to have power, desire to form a majority? Is it a desire to build, desire to focus on economics? And then at what point do you say, yeah, but you have to follow the party line? Because everybody, to some degree, is going to have to follow the party line. To Ms. Gladu's, I don't know if you want to call it credit, she voted against that bill that was, to ban conversion therapy. But it's confusing because at the same time, then she also put out a statement saying that she was vehemently opposed to the practice. So there are some, so it's hard to figure out especially for her on some stances where she exactly stands. She has taken a very much more of a libertarian stance, especially in the last few years. Once kind of with the pandemic, she formed a civil liberties caucus that was at the time thought to be a vehicle to remove the party leader at the time, Erin O'Toole. All of these things. So you have to at some point you have to be, as Amanda was saying, not just as a party you have to be what you are, but as a person you have to be what you are. And people are going to be looking for authenticity. So if you're going to say that the voters of my riding, this used to be a bellwether riding, but before that, up until I was elected 4 times, and then they've gone and they've voted for me. So who are you that you were presenting to the voters to now be standing for? And that, I think, is where the rubber's going to hit the road, because you can't say, a few weeks ago, absolutely anybody who crosses the floor should face the voters, to then immediately turn around and do the same thing.
Well, except that is what is happening. But Tim, I would say that the flip side of this, the challenge for the Conservatives, is that it does send a message that the Mark Carney tent is huge. If you're a voter and you might lean more socially conservative, well, hey, look at Marilyn Gladu. She found such common cause with the Prime Minister that she joined his team. So, talk a bit about some of the challenges.
Or even more acutely, Catherine, that the Liberals will take in the Grim Reaper, because there is the great
I think you need to explain this.
I will give, not offending you, Ms. Gladu, personally, but you once wore a costume of the Grim Reaper at a Conservative convention in 2016, and Paul McLeod, the journalist, is circulating that photo. So
I was there. She threw it off and then played Taylor Swift's Shake It Off, because she wanted the Conservatives to shake off the bad energy of the last election. So, she's a lot of fun at a party.
She's a character. There is no doubt about that. And I'll go to your question. I really will. I wonder how much of this, too, is specifically about Sarnia, because sometimes when MPs cross the floor, they are able to justify it in their own head if they think they have support in their community when something is dramatic and dire. And of course, Sarnia is an important community in Canada, very much tied into what's happening with Kuzma. So I wonder if we will hear that justification. Love to hear, and I'm sure you'll get them, Catherine, what the people of Sarnia think. Yeah, look, it's never a great day, regardless of the personality of the MP, when you lose an MP. Certainly the Conservatives are expressing their vitriol with Ms. Gladu's move. You can see that all over social media. It's a tough one, right? You can't quite ignore it because you have to speak to it. So they're pointing to these contradictions and getting there. But it's going to lead, the reality is it will lead to weeks and weeks and weeks now of what does this mean? What does this mean about Pierre Poilievre and his leadership? That's probably the biggest blow. This is also happening on the week when a very effective member of Pierre Poilievre's team has decided, for whatever reason, and I'm not saying the two are linked, but when Katie Merrifield, the communications director, I think, who was very highly regarded, credited for improving some of the approaches of Poilievre, she's leaving too as of Friday. So, that's tough for the opposition leader.
I do want to talk, and we are going to talk a little bit more about the implications for Pierre Poilievre, but Jordan, I do just want to stay with Marilyn Gladu for a minute because, the Conservatives will say hypocrisy based on what she said about by-elections, questioning whether she really fits in the fold. The NDP will say, look how conservative, they are saying, look, Mark Carney is actually a conservative, but at the end of the day, what Mark Carney is almost certainly leading a majority government in a couple of days. And I'm not sure, is that a decent trade-off for the Liberals, I guess?
Well, he certainly seems to think so. But I think it's not without its problems. I mean, Marilyn Gladu is from the far-right flank of the Conservative Party. This is not somebody who's been shy about their socially conservative beliefs, someone who was rebuked by a former leader for spreading vaccine misinformation. It's clear that the Liberals under Carney are building a big tent, and apparently it's such a big tent you can drive a trucker convoy through it, because she also supported the trucker convoy. Yes. And I think one of the challenges that you can imagine is that those caucus meetings with the Liberals are going to be pretty awkward right now. You have Marilyn Gladu sitting with people like Stephen Guilbeault, like Karina Gould, like many other, Rob Oliphant, many others who share strong progressive values and have a real history of advocating exactly against the policies that Marilyn Gladu has used her position to advance for the last decade.
But I guess if we, always trying to think about, well, what's the other side of that? And I suppose the counter-argument might be, is that where Canadians are right now, where the biggest thing we're concerned about, you saw it in the last election, has to do with the security of the country. And so some of these other social issues that have caused division in the past, people are willing to put them aside.
I think the biggest thing Canadians are concerned about right now, for many Canadians, it's clearly Trump. For a lot of other Canadians, it's affordability. But the reason that Prime Minister Carney is being so politically successful right now, part of the magic of his leadership is that he's been able to present himself as somebody beyond politics, outside of politics. And I think the challenge of a move like this is that it is so clearly a very political move. Ms. Gladu is not a natural fit within the Liberal caucus. And so the reason that she is coming over to the party is to create that majority, which is in itself a very political move. And the problem, I think, for the Prime Minister is that it starts to go to some of his values and question some of the reasons behind his decision making. Is this just a political move? And is that something that could harm his reputation down the road? We'll see.
Can I just pick up on that? Because I think there's two risks. The Liberals have had a good day. When you're close to a majority and you're there, let's give them that. But I want to build on Jordan's point, because it'd be interesting to watch Montreal this weekend. When the Liberals, and I think Amanda would agree with this, have gotten themselves in trouble in the past, it's when they look self-certain, when they get triumphant, when triumphalism creeps in. That's a big... Mark Carney, as Jordan rightly says, has avoided that. Can they avoid it? It's hard to do at a convention. It's hard to do when you at the best of times, because that's a lot of the DNA of a party that's been successful. But Mark Carney's magic has been in not being a politician. So as the opportunity of more floor crossers come over, they have to start to manage the expectations on that, so they don't look too crass and craven politically.
I mean, it does make me think, I want to bring you here in a second, Amanda, but of the comments that Michael Ma made that surprised a lot of folks about forced labor. And you have to wonder to what extent that is about not perhaps to what extent the Liberals entirely understood what Michael Ma's views were when they brought him over to their party, and whether we will see more complications like that. But I guess, Amanda, that brings me to the question of whether there should be, I was going to say a red line. We had a trucker convoy pun. I'm not trying for Liberal puns now. But should there be a line? I know I believe it was the year-end interview our chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton did with Mark Carney. She tried to push him on this. Like, is there a view where you would say, well, this person doesn't belong in the party? And there wasn't really a clear answer. But do you think there needs to be, for the Liberals, that there are some folks who might want to be a Liberal, who the Liberals should say, well, sure we're on the same page?
Well, I think the line is as clear as it is when you are seeking candidates for ridings across the country in a general election. I think there are some things that is very clear about the party. We've already discussed them, that are non-negotiables, like a woman's right to choose. And you expect that despite personal views, that you have to have that view in the House. You have to vote along party lines. But beyond that, I mean, there are views that people hold that still come to fruition long after an election is held. So I don't know that you can box it in so succinctly. And I also think that, the voting population is evolving. The issues that matter are evolving. I said this earlier, is the voter base less ideological right now because they're focused on things like stability and outcomes? And because of that, is there more appeal for getting to this majority number so you're able to set the agenda, so that you're able to push legislation through, so that you have the kind of stability that the country craves? But I don't disagree with Tim. I think that, when you hear comments like the last interview where it's like, we're talking to a lot of people, wink, wink, I I think that the Liberals have to be careful and not look gleeful. And at a time when, there's a convention in just a few days away where some of these issues are going to be debated, and a by-election on the other end of that, it should be focused squarely on the things that Canadians are concerned about.
Sherelle, I want to ask you, we're going to go ahead and presume the majority. Of course, democracy very important, but given what we have seen in some of these Liberal strongholds in the past, it looks like the Liberals are going to have the numbers to certainly push themselves over the line. What does it mean if Mark Carney has, in effect, today and with these by-elections, secured a majority? Like, how significant is that? What might change?
I don't know if a lot will change immediately, because Mark Carney, to this point, has not been overly concerned with the politics of the House of Commons. He will do what needs to be done to get legislation passed, but he has not been super concerned about the horse trading and the compromising and all of these other things that other prime ministers who are at the head of minority parliaments have had to really concern themselves with, because it's been so close, or because he's kind of always had something or somebody in the bag. So I don't know if a lot will change, except to say that maybe some of those conversations between the parties and between the House leaders will potentially fall by the wayside. I mean, there's still as the last few weeks have kind of fleshed out, certain things like committees, which would be the biggest thing within the House that would really help the government move their agenda even faster through the House. It's not a flip of the switch to get the Liberal majority and chair of those committees. So I don't know if a lot will change, except for how are we moving legislation through the House? Well, maybe we'll go towards procedural elements. We'll do things differently, but there's going to be, I think, a lot fewer conversations than there were before, and there weren't that many to begin with.
Tim, Pierre Poilievre in all of this. The Toronto Star has some reporting at this hour. They are citing two federal Conservative sources saying up to 40 Conservative MPs are worried they could lose their seat if Pierre Poilievre leads the party in the next election against Liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney. That by Tonda McCharles and Raisa Patel.
When did Gladu leave? That only took 6 hours. I mean,
yeah, what's going on here? Sort of take us behind the curtain.
Go back a few days too. Althea Raj in the Toronto Star talked about discontent that apparently was there because of a letter that was sent from somebody on Poilievre's staff to MPs asking them basically to justify their roles as shadow ministers. I'm still not prepared to write the obituary of Pierre Poilievre. I think that would be absolute folly, because a lot of the people in the Conservative Party do look to what happened in Calgary, where he got 87% of the vote. He has a very loyal base still, and you will notice that again in all of the forums where the base congregate. They're still very strong and loyal to him. So it would not surprise me, MPs being MPs, we all know MPs, that when things get shaky, people start chatting. They also get torqued up as into what's actually happening. I'm not disputing my fellow Newfoundlander Tonda's reporting, because I value my life, so I won't do that.
I was going to say.
But I do.
We'll lock the door in case you decide to.
But I do think now more than ever, his leadership is in a much more vulnerable place. I'm not going to call it fragile, but it's vulnerable, because he's a smart guy. He's been around politics. He saw what happened with the Canadian Alliance when people walked away from Stockwell Day. He knows the history of all of this, that if caucus starts to get discontented and 4 people have left your caucus, how do you put an end to it? And he's tried some things. He's had some progress, in fairness to him, I think. Prior to today, he changed his messaging and approach, and that seemed to be meeting with some positive response. It's not moved the polls, but he's in a more precarious place than he's been.
Jordan, Fred Delory, who is on this show and also on Curse of Politics with you, has made the argument that time actually helps the Conservatives right now, because running an election against Mark Carney at this moment probably wouldn't work out for them, so it gives them more time to rebuild and his message. Talk to me about what you see in the push-pull of Pierre Poilievre, not having to sort of dive into an election at this moment, but on the other hand, if he is potentially a drag on the numbers for the party, how long he can sustain that position.
Yeah, well, I salute Fred's optimism. I'm not sure it's well placed, though. because I think that we're also seeing a way in which time is Poilievre's enemy here. And the drip of dissensions from caucus is really deeply wounding him right now. And I think you can actually see it, just as Tim was saying, he's coming off a period where he's made a concerted effort to open up to more mainstream media, to be communicating in a different way that was, it was going okay for him. And now, that's all being washed away by this, right? And if there are more floor crossers, that's going to continue. So this is an erosion that is ongoing for him. And the danger for him has never been about his base. It's always been about caucus. And whether, on balance, they think that they have the confidence that he can lead them through the next election. And especially when it's not clear when that election is going to be, that could be a very long time. And that open-ended nature of how long that caucus may need to wait to contest the Liberal government at the polls again also could place pressure on them to maybe want to make a change in leadership sooner rather than later. So I think it's normal for them to be very skittish right now. This is a really destabilized time, and you can clearly see that all the years where Poilievre and his team engaged in very heavy-handed caucus management have not served them well now that they're in a more precarious position, because there's no loyalty or sense of wanting to support him through this period. And it does leave people vulnerable, I think, to some of those arguments about maybe he's not the right person to lead into the next election, particularly if it's further off.
Amanda, I want to ask you about something. One of the most interesting political discussions I have had with anyone in the last few months was a conservative who was saying to me, we were talking about, might Mark Carney, this is before some of these floor crossings, might Mark Carney push for an election? And it was an MP who said to me, listen, people say Mark Carney is not a political natural. He's not a guy who's inclined towards politics. This conservative MP said to me, point to me one person who's had better political instincts in the last, I don't know how many years. I mean, we look at these floor crossings. Do we need to reassess this argument about the extent to which Mark Carney isn't really a politician when he has done some certainly politically successful things, given what happened the moment he chose to sort of come into the scene, and then also what's happening with these floor crossers? Is he perhaps much more politically savvy than he sometimes gets credit for?
So funny you say that, because I heard the news this morning, and the first thought that came to my mind is what is Mark Carney's secret sauce? What is going on here? This is, 4 conservative MPs crossing the floor in a matter of months is not a one-off. It's a trend. And it's not just about what you're walking away from, it's what you're walking to. He has an appeal that, we've talked about it. It's broadening and building a coalition that is accepting more people under this tent. But he has an appeal that's beyond that. We see that in his numbers, in the polls. And I don't know if that's because he has some kind of crass political instincts that we're all unaware of, or that the fact that he doesn't come from a long time, politically held views, that he brings these worldviews into this, makes him more appealing at this time when we have to look to the world. And I think that that's an interesting take and an interesting consideration. I also think that, as it relates to Poilievre, there's this building of a narrative of division at a time when unity is political currency. And I think that that is such a danger. So while Carney is enjoying the unity and the cohesion and the stability, the opposite is true of Poilievre. And all of these things come into question about his leadership. So I fail to understand how time will buy him some grace on this. I think that the articles that we're reading are true, ruptures within the party and true concerns about his ability to keep this team together and to make cohesion which is critically important at this really vulnerable time for him.
Sherelle, we heard Evan Solomon saying, talking to lots of folks, having lots of conversations. What will you be watching for if there are indeed other floor crossers? What are the questions we still want to see answered, the things that you're wondering about?
look back to something else that Evan Solomon said today. I think he said we're looking for unity, not uniformity. To what degree is Marilyn Gladu an outlier, or is this going to be a trend of, hey, everybody and anybody is welcome here because we are kind of mission focused and we're not really caring about the details. So if there are more people, and this is the thing, the Gladu of it all was surprising, I think, for a lot of people. It's not something that a lot of people saw coming simply because of, who she's been, what she stood for, and what she said, within a matter of weeks ago. So I don't know if we would see something to that degree if people look to her and say, well, if Marilyn Gladu can do it, then surely me with, my much more moderate views would be an easy sell to potentially my constituents, potentially to other Liberals, and it might be something easier to walk through. So as they're heading into, the Liberals heading into the convention, are they going to want to come across, is Mark Carney going to want to get up on that stage and say, hey, here's my new, merry band of floor crossers.
And does she wear the Grim Reaper robe? I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it's the occasion for it.
Might not be the vibe.
But just on that, we all know conventions, they are very much stagecraft events. So this is happening today. What's going to happen tomorrow? Is there a Bloc Québécois? I don't know anything, but because that's the one party of the big four that he's not popped anybody from. Do they pop somebody from the Bloc before the convention?
Is that the red line, though, right? Like sovereigntist views, that's an interesting question.
Well, I mean, the Bloc originally started as progressive conservatives, and if Mark Carney is a progressive conservative, as some people, I'm sure they can square the circle there, though, right? And that, who knows? We shall see where they go.
Jordan, I do wonder, we haven't talked much about what this means for the NDP. When Avi Lewis won, I think we could see that a Mark Carney majority was very much a possibility, but still, how challenging an environment is it for him to make the case to grow the party amidst another party that's busy growing itself and pushing the NDP further out?
Right. Well, I think in this case the Liberals are growing themselves quite far rightward. So it's probably more of an opportunity and an opening for him than anything else, because there are going to be Liberal voters or NDP Liberal voters who are going to be pretty uncomfortable with the welcoming of somebody like Marilyn Gladu. I think, to be frank about it, it is unlikely that she would have been approved to run for the Liberal Party prior to crossing, based on her history and her views. So it's tough to imagine that's going to be an easy fit for a lot of those progressive voters. I think Mr. Lewis has an opportunity to stay focused on some of the affordability issues that the government has not really been focused on, and to show that he can do that while staying true to some of those progressive values that really animate him and have historically animated the party.
We could have a lot of fun and pick like the least likely floor crossers in Parliament, but we might get ourselves into trouble, and I'm only guest hosting, so we probably shouldn't. I will just say thank you to all of you for being here for this exceptionally interesting day. We appreciate you, Power Panel, Jordan Leignitz, Sherelle Evelyn, Tim Powers, and Amanda Alvaro.